Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa alihi tahirin. Wa salamu taslima. This is our second lesson of Islamic norms. Or Islamic introduction to Islamic fiqh. In our last lesson, we discussed how we have this word fiqh and tafakkur, and we said that in the hadith and the Quran, we find that this word is used to mean profound understanding. And we said that later on, this word became used in a more narrow sense to mean a profound understanding of Islamic norms, or the do's and don'ts that are required in the religion. And we said that Islamic education is divided into three types. The education related to beliefs and realities, and the second would be the education related to morality and self-purification, and the third are the norms or the laws of actions, which are what are required of us to reach to obedience, to fulfill our obedience to God and get closer to God. So in this lesson, we want to talk about the types of laws. And we want to say that in this, our second lesson, that laws are divided into two types. They are divided into hukam taklifi, which are the laws of responsibility. Taklif is like responsibility. So when a person becomes of the age of bulugh, of maturity, they are considered a person with taklif. They have responsibility, and when there's a responsibility, it means you must perform some duties. And then we have our second division, which is hukam al-wadiya, or wadi. Wadi is like to place or putting. So these are the norms of situation, the situational norms. And so we have hukam, which is ahkam and hukum. They come from the same meaning, which means like rules. They come from the same verb. And then we have this division of hukam taklifi, the rules or norms of responsibility, and the rules and norms of situations. So we've divided them here into that. Now, when we talk about the hukam taklifi, the laws of responsibility, we have something called ahkamul kamsa. We have this ahkamul kamsa. Right here. This is ahkamul kamsa. Now, ahkamul kamsa is a plural for hukam. Ahkam means laws in plural, or norms in plurals, the do's and don'ts. And kamsa, al-kamsa, is 5 in Arabic. So these are the 5 norms, the 5 types of duties, the 5 rules. And these 5 rules are wajib. Now, an example of wajib is like our daily prayers. It is wajib to perform them, and if we do not perform this wajib, it is a sin. Or wearing hijab, it is wajib, and if we do not perform this wajib, it is a sin. So, Then we have prohibition, haram. It is haram to drink. It is haram to drink alcohol, and if one drinks alcohol, it is a sin. So in these two types, we have 100% harm. Because harm could be either spiritually harmed, or materially harmed, like bodily harm, or we can have both. So here we have 100% harm in wajib and haram. This is why they are haram, and wajib, they have 100% harm or 100% benefit. So wajib is 100% benefit. If somebody performs the wajib, it is 100% good for them. And if someone refrains from haram, they avoid 100% harm. And if someone does haram, it is 100% bad for them, 100% harmful to them. So these are wajib to do, and haram is wajib to refrain from, wajib to avoid. So these are very much the most necessary classification of wajibs and duties that we have. Now, after this, we have our next division, our third type, which is mustahab and makruh. Mustahab and makruh are something that you can do to earn the pleasure of God, and you can avoid the makruh to earn the pleasure of God. And in these, there is a probable harm or a probable benefit, but clearly, as we want to be sure to emphasize on, that if any action is done with the intention of nearness to God, as long as it is wajib, mustahab, or mubah, if you do an action, it is beneficial to and brings you closer to God. And if you refrain from an action, any action that is haram or makruh, it will bring you closer to God if you refrain from it with the intention of nearness to God, or to comply with what God expects from us. Therefore, in all five of these comes a akam, you can get closer to God by your intention to perform or refrain from such a thing. So we have this mustahab. Mustahab is something that is desirable to do. It is good to do, but it's not a sin if you don't do it. Example of mustahab is like saying takbir 3 times at the end of your prayer after taslim. After we say taslim in prayer, we do takbir 3 times. We say Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, and this is mustahab. If one leaves off of it, it is not hurting the validity of their wajib. Their wajib prayer is still valid, but it is a good thing to do. There are many instances of mustahab, and it is very, very good to do. So, and then we have makruh. Makruh is something which is undesirable. It is detestable, but it is not a sin if one does it. Such as, we have an example of makruh is fasting on the day of Ashura. Fasting on the day of Ashura is makruh, according to Ayatollah Sistani. So, there are many instances, again, of makruh, that we could avoid something that's not a sin if we do, but it is a way to earn God's pleasure. And then we have mubah. Now mubah is something that does not fall into any of the other classifications. The other 4 classifications, they all have indications somewhere in the religious text. They have indications between the hadith or Quran, and this is where we come up with with these, and we'll be looking at this all four sources of Islamic rules: the Quran, Hadith, or Quran, Sunnah, and Ijma, consensus. If it discovers the view of the Imam of the time, or of the Imam, and then we have Aql, and all these. We'll be looking at these in our next lesson, inshallah. But here, mubah in fiqh means something which is has no indication in the rules to say that it is bad, good, probable bad, wajib, haram, mustahab, makruh, whatever. It is something that clearly is not a sin, not a good thing. That doesn't matter. It's like sitting or drinking water. It has no consequences. But Ibn Tawus, our great mystic scholar, Ibn Tawus, he believed that mubah didn't really exist, because he said that one can perform every single action with an intention of God's pleasure and avoiding God's displeasure. So he believed that this type did not exist. So, but regardless, from a fiqhi point of view, mubah exists, because not everything is accountable, or even disliked or liked to do. And from a fiqhi point of view, we got to remember fiqh is very careful not to say something is haram, halal, wajib, makruh, mustahab without some kind of indication. So they're very careful, because you don't want to prohibit something which is not forbidden, and you don't want to allow something which is forbidden. So they're very careful. The scholars who research for fatwa and things like this, and this is why it's important to find the most knowledgeable marja for taqlid, and so that way we know that he has done his job very well when looking at these resources. But we'll talk about taqlid then a little later too. So we have these Ahkam al-Khamsa, the 5 laws. Now we have another division of obligations. And here we divide obligations into 2 types, tabudi and tawassuli. Now tabudi laws, tabudi wajib, are wajibs that require the niyatul qurba, the intention of nearness to God, for their validity, such as prayer and fasting. They're both wajib tabudi. And now tawassuli is those laws or those norms that do not require the intention of nearness to God for their validity, such as reciting the marriage contract. A reciter of the marriage contract may have different intentions. Maybe he's thinking that he can recite the marriage contract in such a beautiful way, and he's famous for this. But whatever, the marriage is still valid. The marriage contract is still valid, regardless of what his intentions were. However, if one did these things with the intention of nearness to God, they would truly benefit their spirituality and their soul to a great extent. So it's very important to do that. But from a fiqhi point of view, again, we must be very careful, because there has to be indications for such things. However, from a general premise, if you want to say a marriage contract for nearness of God, that's a very beautiful action. If you want to do business contracts with the awareness of God and for God's sake, then that is a very beautiful action. Like if you're somebody with money and you want to go and invest some money and help a poor fellow out and start a business, and you know that you're gonna give him the money and you're gonna do an Islamic contract of business and company here, and you're gonna help them out for Allah's sake. This is a beautiful thing. But maybe your intention would be just to earn some more money for your own self. So it wouldn't hurt the validity of the contract at all, but it would be a beautiful thing. And I think this is why, I want to emphasize that the taqwa is the ruh, the spirit of the norms. And this is what I want to cultivate in everybody, is this sort of idea of that we should do things. When we do anything, no matter what it is, it's our prayers, how we speak to people, how we do business contracts, everything we must do with a sense of taqwa, being moral people, being ethical people, with a sense of taqwa, and a sense of and with awareness of God's pleasure and avoidance of His displeasure in everything we do. So this is tawassuli type, and now we have another type. We have wajib aini. What is wajib aini? And we have wajib kafai. What is wajib aini? Wajib aini means that something is obligatory upon all the Muslims, such as prayer and fasting, of course after the age of taklif, but such as prayer and fasting. Then we have wajib kafai. What is wajib kafai? Wajib kafai is when something is obligatory on all the Muslims until one Muslim or a group of them fulfill the need or perform the action, and then the whole entire group is relieved from the obligation. Otherwise, they're guilty of not fulfilling that obligation. Such as when we bring scholars in, to have a scholar there for people's needs, is wajib kafai, and or doctors, to have doctors is wajib kafai. So it is a big responsibility to be a Muslim community in general, because a lot of things are wajib on the whole community that are big things. Big things are wajib on the whole community. So there are there's some other examples of these. So it's very important. Maybe another example we could think of is when we say salam. Say we walk in and there's a group and we say salam alaikum. If one says salam alaikum, they relieve the whole group of saying salam alaikum back, because it's wajib to reply to salam with wa alaikum salam. But it's not wajib that everybody in the group, say there's 10 people there, it's not wajib that everybody goes salam alaikum, salam alaikum, salam alaikum, and so on. So it's very this is a wajib kafai. Then we have another type of division. Now we've had two divisions of so far. We divide them 2 by 2 of obligations. So don't be confused. They're all separate divisions of how we can look at from a different aspect the notion of wajib norms. So another one that we have here is wajib ta'ini and wajib takhiri. Wajib ta'akhiri. So wajib ta'ini is when there is an obligation that a specific thing must be performed. So a specific thing must be performed, such as the daily prayers. It is wajib ta'ini. They must be performed, or fasting, hajj, qum, zakat. And then we have wajib ta'akhiri. Wajib ta'akhiri is an obligation which is duty bound to perform one thing, when a person is duty bound to perform one thing out of 2 or several things. So this is like optional. It's wajib to perform one of these options. An example of this is if somebody intentionally broke their fast. They intentionally broke their fast during the holy month of Ramadan. Intentionally. When there was no exemption, like they were residing at home and such, and then now they have a kafara to pay. They have to do something to make up for it. They have the option to either free a servant, which we don't have no more, because Islam removes slavery slowly, and then to feed 60 poor people, or to fast consecutively for 2 months. So this is wajib al-takhiri. Now our last type is called wajib nafsi and wajib muqaddami. Wajib nafsi is when something is obligatory for itself. It is a duty itself for itself. It's a duty, it's the concern of the Islamic legislation for its own sake. And for its own sake it is demanded. So, such as prayers and Hajj. And then wajib muqaddami is when something is a prerequisite to a wajib, so it becomes wajib to perform that wajib, such as performing wudu to perform a wajib prayer, or to obtain the visa to go on Hajj. So these are the types of obligations, and we said that there is wajib nafsi, wajib muqaddami, wajib ta'ini, which is when something is specific to perform for itself, or a specific thing must be performed, such as Hajj and Qums. And then we have ta'khiri, is when there was an option between the to perform, and then we had kafai, which is when it was a general obligation on the Muslims, and if some fulfill it or one fulfills it, then it's not wajib no more. And we had aini, wajib aini, which is when it is wajib on all the Muslims, like prayer. And then we had tawassuli, which doesn't require an intention of nearness to be valid, and ta'budi, which requires the intention of nearness to be valid. And then we said that we had divided the law, the Islamic norms, into hukam taklifi and hukam wadi. And we said that these are the situational laws and the responsibility laws. And we said that in the responsibility laws we had the khamsa akam, the 5 laws, the wajib, haram, mustahab, makruh, and mubah. This is our lesson for today. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.